That's a continuation of my life since I have always been with much younger than me, teaching physics for 42 years. I retired now, so who cares? I'm kind of a freelance expert in energy. These two young people will introduce themselves later. I will just give a small introduction to this. I am living now something, I have the feeling that I lived it early in the 90s. The hen and egg dilemma. With PV, early in the 90s, industry was saying to the market, hey, give me the market, I give you the prices. And in the other hand, the market was answering to the industry, give me the prices, I will give you the market. This dilemma was broken by the feed-in tariff thing, meaning that the lesson curve of PV was based on a price reduction by 20% each time the cumulative market multiplies by 2. This is just huge. This is something we knew already mid-90s. And at the beginning of 2000, when, let's say, intelligent governments understood this, they launched this feed-in tariff thing, which they subsidized the demand of PV electricity, not subsidizing the offer, but subsidizing the demand to create a market. And the market was created, and the reduction of the prices was accelerated. Now I'm coming to hydrogen. We are exactly at the same stage, same phase that PV was early in the 90s. Market is saying, give me the price. And the industry says, give me the market. But still remains that we are missing an information for hydrogen. This is where both technologies differ. We knew that PV was going to break down the prices with the more market. The fact is that we still do not really know how much the prices of electrolysis are going to go down if the market is increased. We still need some breaking technologies, some technologies using less expensive metals, some technologies. We don't necessarily need more efficiency. It's not the problem. Efficiency, it's not the problem. We are already at something like 60, 65%. So who cares? If we go to 90%, what happens? The price will be reduced by 1/3. It's not the problem. We need the prices to be reduced by 80%. Go from $5 to $1. Now, when there is turnover, there is value added. And where there is value added, there are jobs. And this is the introduction for this session, because we are not going to speak about technology, but we're going to speak about socio-economic impacts. I don't think that we are going to change the sociology of the world with hydrogen, of course. Not as the television has changed it, not as the mobile phone have changed it. Hydrogen will not change the sociology of the world, but it should change some aspects of jobs and the amount of jobs in the engineering market. Now, I'm going to leave 30 seconds, 1 minute to each of my colleagues here. First of all, Sabrine EMRAN, who's in the new policy center for the New South in Rabat. As you see, she is almost as old as me. She's almost half age of my daughters, but brilliant, as you will see.
Thank you very much, Dr. BENOUNNA, for this introduction, which is very insightful and gives us already a glimpse of your tremendous experience in the sector. I'd also like to thank the ERSN for their invitation and the organizers for the tremendous work they've been putting together in this event. So as Dr. BENOUNNA mentioned it, I am an energy economist working at the Policy Center for the New South. And for those of you who are not familiar with the institution, it's a Moroccan-based think tank that aims to foster the improvement of social and economic public policies that challenge Morocco and African countries as an integral part of the global South. So among the areas of research that I focus on are energy transition, financing energy transition, and also strengthening the role of renewable energy in energy security. Which brings me here today to speak about hydrogen, but more specifically about zero carbon hydrogen or green hydrogen. So today, to put things into context, countries are actually running and are being at the head of the race when it comes to reducing carbon emissions, but also when it comes to combat climate change. And hydrogen will be playing a really key role in the future. And to highlight this with numbers, actually, the green hydrogen must play a significant role in the upcoming years, ranging from 7 to 24% of global energy needs by 2050 in order to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. On the other hand, we also have the International Agency of Energy that underscores hydrogen's importance when it comes to deploying energy, and it's expected to make up to 10% of total energy consumption, especially in hard to decarbonize sectors. So in this context, Morocco is no exception and is actually putting green hydrogen in the center of its energy transition strategy, which is also in line with a number of international guidelines and emission reduction pledges, such as the UN Climate Conference and the COP26, where hydrogen is expected to be used as a means to decarbonize heavy industry, long-haul freight, shipping, and aviation. So as I mentioned earlier, I'll be tackling the subject from an economic and perspective and standpoint, and I will be also talking about the social perspectives of green hydrogen in Morocco. So if you allow me, I'll start my first slide with the green hydrogen roadmap that the Moroccan energy minister has introduced in 2021. And it's important to highlight that Morocco's path when it comes to energy transition did not start yesterday. And already in 2009, Morocco has adopted an ambitious strategy in terms of energy that focuses on developing renewable energy in the electricity sector. So as highlighted in the figure next to me, Morocco unveiled its green hydrogen strategy roadmap, which is based on 3 strategic areas. First, as already mentioned by Dr. BENOUNNA, technologies, research, and development will really have to play a key role in this area in Morocco. Second, we have investment and supply, and we will be focusing a bit later in the presentation on the means and the ways of having innovative financing when it comes to renewable energy and when it comes to green hydrogen. And finally, markets in demand, because it's important to know what is the target and how the market is going to be looking like and where is the demand will be coming from. In my presentation, thus I'll be focusing on 2 key areas, which are investment and supply and markets and demand. So according to the roadmap, actually, Morocco intends to produce green hydrogen through electrolysis technology using green electricity. Hydrogen can also exist in its natural form in underground deposits, as we all know it. However, as highlighted in the scheme on my right, in order to produce and exploit, we need to really focus on key areas. when it comes, the slide is already changed. So when it comes to actually understanding where the demand will be coming from, I think that it's important to make a clear distinction between internal and domestic demand and external demand. And I think that the second area is very important because Morocco has a lot of assets that can play a key role into making it a competitive actor when it comes to exporting green hydrogen. So on the domestic side, I think it's important to highlight three possible applications. First, we have using green hydrogen as an input in industrial processes. And by this, I mean what the roadmaps actually focuses on and puts emphasis on, which is capitalizing on power-to-X applications, improving the fertilizer industry integration, but also possibly using green hydrogen in the refinery industry, and having green hydrogen also aid the desulfurization of crude oil without the output of CO2 emission into the atmosphere. On the other hand, we also have, to a lesser extent, using green hydrogen as an alternative fuel in the transportation sector, either in the form of green hydrogen or as a synthetic fuel, and to a much, much lesser extent, in my opinion, maybe using green hydrogen to replace imported liquefied petroleum gas commonly used in Morocco for heating and cooking purposes. But again, I have reservation about this use, and I think that it is to a much, much lesser extent. And finally, as you must have heard it before, and one of the key roles of green hydrogen that will be used in Morocco is as a storage and flexibility solution, which constitutes a real asset in mitigating the intermittency and also increasing resilience and reliability of renewable energy sources in Morocco and safeguarding the national network. Now, moving to the external market, I think that we cannot mention the external demand without saying that Morocco has two key assets. First, its geographical position, which makes the country really blessed by having both access to Mediterranean and the Atlantic, but also the role that Morocco played in actually putting its ports in the heart of its strategies and making Moroccan ports really ranked at the first ranks on an international level. And when it comes to Morocco's plan, actually 75% of the green hydrogen exports will be in the form of ammonia, and the remaining 25% will actually be in synthetic liquid fuels. And I think it's important to highlight that when it comes to synthetic liquid fuels, they could potentially, I mean really, replace imported conventional fuels for local industries, but also be transported, if economically feasible and viable, through pipelines to Europe and to West Africa. And when it comes to ports, again, I think it's important to highlight that they can serve as central and focal points for aggregating demand from various sources, including their own operations at the first level, but also to maritime and land transport and local industry. And finally, they can also play the role of functioning as a storage, production, and global export assets for the hydrogen industry. Now, moving to the financial aspects around financing green hydrogen in Morocco. The slide is here as well. So in the context of green hydrogen project financing, I think that there are several areas that we should focus on. So first, we can generate financing in the most traditional ways, which would mean that that emphasis lies in tapping into readily available funding sources. So we have at the first round government subsidies, private investment, and also incentives that are closely linked to carbon reduction goals. However, we need to be a little more innovative, and this is where collaboration is key between the private and the public sector. And there is this figure that actually strikes me a lot, is that for financing sustainable infrastructure projects, we actually need for each dollar from the public sector, $9 from the private sector. However, in 2021, in low and middle income countries, each dollar was only met by 25 cents, which actually highlights that private sector and public sector need to collaborate together for the effective development and efficient development of green hydrogen projects in Morocco, but really any country that expects and intends to. And actually, the financing landscape also underscores the necessity for collaboration for other means, which brings us to adapted finance. And here I'd like to highlight a study that was actually conducted in the Asian market about how to finance green hydrogen projects. And it was mentioned that when you actually finance them uniquely with bank loans, you have a really high risk dimension for investors, which means that having blended sources of finance could actually be the right way to do so. So according to the study, using 46% of bank loans and the remaining of green bonds was actually the best way to actually reduce risk, but also diversify the funding sources and making it more efficient. Which brings us to the fourth point, which is risk management. So I think in order to attract private investment, one of the key components to take into account is how private investors actually perceive the risk. And this can be various types of risks. We have project risk, currency risk, country risk, but also how you perceive the country through the ratings provided by private agencies in terms of how the country's risk is perceived. And this is why I think that having de-risking tools, such as we mentioned it using green bonds, for instance, but also having insurances and joining the first point of having the public sector's implication as well, can reduce the risk perception as it is perceived by private investors. And finally, long-term vision. And I think that this goes without saying because renewable energy sources actually have a high initial cost, but then they become cheaper in time, as it was really brilliantly highlighted by Dr. BENOUNNA. So this is why investors should really have a long-term vision that is matching the projects before entering them, and not only expect really rapid return, because that would create frustration from both ends. So now I will be moving into my last slide and to the social aspects. And to be completely honest with you, I was a bit reluctant about speaking about the social impacts because I was not sure to what extent it can be actually changing the social landscape to be speaking about green hydrogen today. But one of the key areas, as mentioned by Dr. BENOUNNA also, is job creation. So it's actually simplistic. And as we were having a conversation with Ruchi yesterday, you can actually Google it and find that green hydrogen will be creating jobs, but what kind of jobs? And this is where skills development comes at very key and striking, because we need to have the human resources and the human assets that are actually having the right training and have the right trainers in order to do so in the green hydrogen industry. And again, I'm giving the Australian example in a study in which they found that it actually requires 5 years of training in the green hydrogen industry in order to be able to train other human resources and to have the right human capital for this industry. On the other hand, we have energy security and environmental benefits. And in order to clear the confusion, energy security was actually highlighted in IRENA's report in 2022 of the ways in which green hydrogen can change the country's energy landscape. But I'd like to mention that when I say energy security, I really mean by reducing the intermittency and increasing the resilience and reliability of renewable energy sources. And when it comes to environmental benefits, I think that goes beyond saying that using green hydrogen can only take a chunk or a part of fossil fuel usage and make the energy mix clearer. Although I'd like to highlight that what we are looking for is a diversified energy mix, because the last few years have taught us more than ever that diversification is key, and that reliance on one source of energy and one partner for importing energy can really be very dangerous in the current context. And finally, I think one of the key aspects would be infrastructure development and attracting private investment. So when it comes to infrastructure development, the construction of hydrogen production facilities, pipelines, and transportation infrastructure can only stimulate economic growth in Morocco in the future, and can also provide opportunities both for local contractors and suppliers. And I'd like to highlight also the fact where green hydrogen projects can also attract foreign direct investment, in an area where Morocco is actually already ranking among the top three countries in Africa, and attracting around more than 9% of the FDIs coming to the continent. And in this sector, Morocco can also aim to benefit from the assistance I have to, okay. So I only have one idea left to say. So I think Morocco can actually benefit, and I'd like to conclude with this, from the assistance of multilateral development banks. And it cannot help but talk about this right before the annual meetings that are thankfully still taking place in Marrakesh very soon. And I think that one of the projects I'd like to highlight is the project by the World Bank Group, which is already working with developing countries to accelerate green hydrogen projects from pilot stage to industrial scales. And one of the projects is already happening in Chile. And I think what's interesting is that multilateral development banks can not only give financing, but also provide technical assistance, also legal framework, and build innovative financing that catalyzes on concessional and climate finance resources while integrating risk and mitigation and credit enhancement instruments to mobilize private capital, but also transfer knowledge to the countries. So with this, I'd like to conclude my presentation. I hope that I wasn't too long, and I'll give the floor to Dr. BENOUNNA to introduce Ruchi.
Brilliant. Do we agree? Yes, I'm leaving the space to Ruchi. Please introduce yourself quickly.
Yes, please.
Yes.
Can I stand here and speak? Do you hear me? No.
No.
Okay, I have to use the mic then. Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Ruchi GUPTA. I'm working as a senior researcher in VITO. We are part of the Flemish government. So we are the independent research agency of the Flanders. And here, thanks Sabrine for giving an overview of the socioeconomic impacts. And we are here in this conference and we are all talking about technology. We are talking about hydrogen cost and to bring down the cost of hydrogen. Of course, as Dr. BENOUNNA said as well, it will take time with economies of scale as we see in solar. But what has not been studied till now, or I would rather say there has been a limited study on the socioeconomic, or rather I would say the macroeconomic impacts of green hydrogen at a country level. Because green hydrogen is a new sector, it's a new industry, and it's still not there. We are still talking about it, but it's still not as part of the country's let's say the economic sector. So each country has something called as input-output table. I don't know how many of you have heard about the input-output table, but it's basically an economic table which has all the sectors I'm going to talk more about in the slides. So maybe, can I get the thing to change, please? Thanks. So, yeah, so I'm not going to spend time. I'm very electrification pro person, and I know whatever could be electrified should be electrified. That includes light duty transportation, service sector, and industries, but there are hard to abate sectors, and for that we need hydrogen. Okay, and there has been few studies, one in UK, one in Australia, where the authors or the researchers have tried to study hydrogen sector and what impact it will have on the GDP, employment, and GHG emissions. And they thought that, okay, hydrogen sector is going to behave as the electricity and the gas sector, because we don't have enough information about that sector. So what they did is they took a proxy approach, thinking that they would behave as the same existing sectors. And what they calculated is a gross impact. So if any industry would come, for example, even if it's a gas industry or diesel or hydrogen, any industry which will come in the country would create GDP, would create jobs, and would create emissions, X amount of emissions, right? What is interesting is to see the net impacts. If I'm replacing diesel by green hydrogen, what is the net impact? Is hydrogen leading to a net positive impact or a negative impact on your GDP or jobs? And that is something interesting, and that I studied as part of a study. So I'm actually going to give you a case of an extreme country of Switzerland, and Morocco is on the other side, because Switzerland is a small country, super expensive, capex is very high, opex is very high, there is scarcity of land. Unlike Morocco, which capex is almost half, there is operational cost, labor is cheap, and of course you have land where you can install large scale solar and wind sources. So I'm going to illustrate a case of Switzerland and going to show what impact I studied for Switzerland. And if Switzerland has a positive case, then Morocco definitely have. So we can derive from there. I already covered this slide. Here, what you see is a simplified hydrogen industry. Okay, so this is my project boundary, where here is hydroelectricity. Also, Morocco, hydroelectricity is an important electricity source along with solar and wind, which is not the case for Switzerland, so that was not included here. So you have a renewable electricity, and with the electrolyzer, you break water into hydrogen and oxygen, and then hydrogen is transported to, let's say, the hydrogen refueling station. And the reason why I took is also because Switzerland is one of the first country that demonstrated a case for hydrogen mobility. So use of hydrogen in heavy duty transportation and also passenger cars, because Switzerland doesn't have carbon intensive industries, which would be a case different for Morocco, because Morocco has a lot of carbon intensive industry. You have demand for ammonia where hydrogen could be used. So here you divide the entire sector into two parts. One is, let's say, year zero is the construction phase, where you construct your hydrogen industry, and that includes hydrogen production through electrolyzer, transportation, and until the refilling station. So that's my project boundary. I did not consider, for example, buying fuel cell cars, and then it's another story. So this is the project boundary for the construction phase. And then the second is the operation phase that starts from year one until the end of lifetime. So for example, here I considered 15-year lifetime. And you create, this is the input-output structure of, let me actually do this one. No, it doesn't work. Wait. Because I cannot click. Can you click? Just click, because yeah, okay, perfect. So this, what you see as a green hydrogen sector, currently doesn't exist in the input-output table. So for those who don't know what is the input-output table, it's input-output model is basically a simple macroeconomic model where you have the interactions between the different sectors of the industry. So for example, you have the same industry on the left hand in the rows as well as in the columns, and you see that how one industry interacts with another industry. For example, electricity industry actually give the output of the electricity industry is also used in electricity, as well as it is the input to other industries as well. So this green hydrogen currently doesn't exist because it's very, very small. And so what I did is I created a new sector within the input output table, and then analyze through the use of multipliers, because using this input output table we can calculate the multipliers. And just to mind you, this is in monetary terms, so all the values are in monetary terms, but you can have satellite accounts where you can have like the jobs and the emissions, and what you calculate is the multiplier, and whatever is the change in the final demand in monetary terms, you multiply with a multiplier to calculate the impact on the GDP, employment, and emissions. So that's what I calculated. And just to mind you, because I wanted to calculate the impact of a sector or a new industry within the country. So I assumed that all the economic activities, including the manufacture of the machinery, for example, the electrolyzer, compressor, happen within the country, and there is no export. So that way you can analyze the total impact. So for example, if you're importing a machinery electrolyzer, then you're impacting the GDP of the other country from where you purchase the electrolyzer, and not of your own country. And that's why I assume that all the economic activity happens within the country. And then I normalized to a 1 megawatt capacity, just for a sake of simplicity, that will give an impact. Of course, it can go in order of magnitude of 1 megawatt, 1 gigawatt, like that. And then oh, I have to go back. Yeah. And then for the net impact analysis, there are 3 different cases. Number 1, equal spending. So we all know that right now hydrogen is expensive, is almost 8-9 times more expensive than diesel. So if, for example, as a customer, I buy a hydrogen car next month, and I'm spending, for example, $100 on my fuel, and you ask me, okay, from next month, you are going to spend $1,000. I say, no, I cannot. I will just spend $100. That's my budget on fuel. And I continue to do that. But if I do that, then which means that I go half a distance, right? So if I have to do like 100 kilometers in a month, I do like, for example, 30 kilometers, because I said, okay, it's expensive, I don't care, I have a budget. So that's the case one that I considered. The second case is the equal energy content. So, and hydrogen has higher energy content. For example, 1 kilogram of hydrogen is equivalent to 3 kilogram in terms of energy. So that I considered. The third case is the useful energy. So the person says that I don't care, I want to cover 100 kilometer, I'm ready to spend more on hydrogen, that doesn't matter. But of course, if your salaries increase, fine. If you have the same salary, then you would deduct your spending from other sectors. So you go less to restaurants, you go less to leisure, or less on holidays, because you have to cover that $900 per month, right? So that's the case. And we will see how, what is the impact in all the three cases. So first of all, what you do is on the year zero, whatever are the expenses, the capex, you know, electrolyzer, compressor, hydrogen system, building construction material, buying a hydrogen truck trailer and IT equipments, you divide it into a different sector, and that actually depends on country to country. So I was talking with Sabrine the other day because I was curious about Morocco or the input-output table, and she told me there are 28 sectors. So Morocco, input-output, the Planning Commission has divided the entire country into 28 major sectors. In Switzerland, it's 49. So that depends on what is a categorization. Some countries also categorize electricity and gas separately. In Switzerland is one category, electricity and gas. So first you divide all your expenses on the capex and the opex, and then you have the intermediate demand. As you see here, I have allocated demand, hydrogen demand, only to the mobility sector, because this is a case for Switzerland. But for Morocco, if you do a similar study, you would do differently. So just to give you the order of magnitude, like for example, a 1 megawatt hydrogen plant in Switzerland is around 4.7 million USD. And you see 85% of the of the construction cost in year zero is coming from the machinery and equipment. So buying electrolyzer, compressors, hydrogen refueling stations. So 85% of the capex is from there. So it's a substantial chunk. And then on the opex is the electricity and the gas is around 60, 61, 62% is the total opex when you talk about, yeah. So then I will quickly take you to the results. What I studied is basically the gross impact from the construction and the operation phase. And what you see on your x-axis are the two phases, and on the y-axis is the different parameters. So for example, the GDP is in USD per ton of hydrogen produced, employment is full-time equivalent jobs, and GHG emissions is kilogram of CO2 per ton of hydrogen. So if you compare, operational phase leads to more higher impact in all the three studied cases compared to the construction phase. And this is the gross impact. And what is interesting is the three cases that I told you, this graph is a bit peculiar. Not everyone understands in first go. So I'm going to explain to you this. On the x-axis, what you see are the different parameters. So let's say you have the final demand change is the case one where the person says, I'm going to spend equal amount. So you see that the hydrogen is normalized to 1 and the diesel is then compared in reference to the hydrogen. So that's how you should read it. And on the, yeah, exactly. So you see the normalization. So if you see the monetary terms is the same. So if, for example, it's 1.25 million USD on hydrogen, the same is on diesel. If we invest the same amount on hydrogen as we were doing earlier in diesel, we see that the GDP created is twice as high by hydrogen compared to diesel. And also the employment is more than 2 times by hydrogen compared to the diesel industry. And when you see the last bar is on the GHG emissions, the GHG emissions are half in case of hydrogen compared to diesel. So there is a positive case. We see net positive change in GDP and employment, and a net reduction in the GHG emissions. So this is the case one. And this is because the difference is because of the multipliers, the difference in the multipliers. This is the case for the equal service where the person says, I don't care spending a lot on hydrogen, but I would prefer to travel the distance. And here you see a additional gray bar, and this is for the other sectors. So you see, like for the same useful energy, so same distance traveled, the person is actually reducing his spending on the other sector that you see in the final demand change. And the GDP, then also the hydrogen leads to a net positive, it leads to 45% higher GDP, 65% more jobs, and 29% lower GHG emissions compared to diesel plus the other sectors. So here we see that hydrogen has a positive case compared to replacement. And that is, of course, in the what was the normalized. And this is for Switzerland for 2035 scenario that I did. And you see the numbers, the GDP change is positive in million USD, FTE, and tons of CO2 abatement that is in negative. So there's a net reduction in all the three cases. So yeah, this was just to show you the absolute number. So the key conclusions of the study is, first of all, we saw that the gross impact on GDP, employment, and emissions in the operational phase is almost 6 times higher for GDP and emission, and almost like 9 to 10 times higher from the construction phase. When we talk about this is the second point when I showed you the graph about in the construction phase, the capital investment from the electrolyzer or the machinery and equipment is around 85%, which shows that encouraging domestic manufacturing would contribute to 83% of additional GDP for the country, and 80% to the FTE jobs, full-time equivalent job in the construction phase. And I was listening yesterday from John Cockrell, and they are also putting up electrolyzer manufacturing. And of course, Morocco is very strategically placed, and you have the resources, you have also cheap labor compared to European countries. And that could be something that Morocco could take advantage of domestic manufacturing that would contribute to country GDP and employment generation. And the third one is we saw that if we shift the spending from diesel to green hydrogen, this is an extreme case for passenger cars. There are a lot of people who don't believe, but yesterday there was a session on hydrogen for mobility, and yeah, would lead to at least, this is a comparison for all the three studied cases, at least 28% higher GDP, 43% more jobs, and 18% lower GHG emissions. So yeah, these are the three conclusions. I would also like to point out the limitations and what is the future work, which is very important. So the input-output table that you saw is from 2017 for Switzerland. For Morocco, the last one is 2015, Sabrine, you said? Yep. Okay. So yeah, that is for both the countries, and for most of the countries is pre-COVID. And with COVID and with war, we saw like a lot of changes in the economic sector's interaction, and that will change the input-output table and hence the results. So this is one thing. And of course, I assumed the last slide I'm showing is on the impact of the international trade. So here in the study, I assume that there's no import and export, and we are talking about export as well. So if you consider that, then the results would change. Of course, if you include more sectors, then you see different results. And that's why it's very important to extend this study with different macroeconomics approaches, and also to extend to other countries. So it would be interesting to do the similar study, for example, in Morocco, and then compare the results with a developed country like Switzerland, for example. Yeah, and that's it from my side. By the way, this study is actually published in Energy Policy. So if you search with the name macroeconomic impacts, then you will be able to find out. I don't know if you are going to share the link, so I can share with the later in the presentation. Thank you so much for your attention and pleasure.
Have you seen how happy I am? Well, I was told that we are short of time. In fact, we planned at the beginning to leave the space for 10 minutes questions in the session, but I think it would not be feasible according to the late we are, and globally, all the organization, not only we. I will add only one thing to your thoughts to think about. To move from this egg and hen dilemma, you can subsidize demand, subsidize offer. We are in a country where, when you subsidize the demand, what happens at the level of the offer, the best one wins. It can be China, it could be Germany, it could be South Africa or whoever. And that's exactly what happens in the PV industry. The demand was subsidized, and finally China won the bid. When you subsidize the offer, you are in another problem, especially at this stage of the development of the technology, that when you subsidize the offer, it's difficult not to stay neutral in terms of technology. Technologically neutral is not possible because you're going to subsidize one of the potential options, okay? And at the bottom line, you can lose that bid, okay? Because you are putting money in probably the wrong horse. And in the case of Morocco, unfortunately, we don't have the possibility to subsidize the demand because the demand is not there. And the only existing demand today for green hydrogen is for industry, phosphates, for fertilizers. And well, in our case, we can there subsidize the demand, but only in that niche of market. Obviously, for transport and whatever, we shouldn't do that. Okay, if we had to subsidize, we can subsidize to increase the local demand of industry uses of green hydrogen. We can do it, but in a limited way. But we must take care of all the lessons learned worldwide about putting subsidies, especially public subsidies, on something that you can expect that you can lose. You know, you put subsidy here, and the winner is elsewhere. That's it. Thank you. I left you with all this. If there is one important question to one of my brilliant partners, yeah, welcome. And we will stop the session. Yes, please.
Thank you. So my name is Abdullah Abri. I'm a consultant at the International Energy Agency. My question to you, Ruchi, and thanks for the really nice presentation. I wanted to understand the rationale behind when you're saying that the hydrogen will provide more advantages economically, socially to the Swiss context. You know, from where this additional incremental benefit is coming from. So if the diesel is there, everything moves. Apparently the cars, the industries, and everything is there. Hydrogen is expensive, at least as of now. So I'm just curious of where is this incremental gains are coming from.
Yeah, thank you so much. I didn't have much time to explain, but glad you asked this question. So in the input-output table, what you calculate, I created a new sector, green hydrogen, and then what you calculate is the multiplier. So what you get is the multipliers from the hydrogen sector versus the multipliers from the diesel industry, let's say. And the difference when you see that slide of equal spending, and if you are spending $100 on both the thing, and why there is a difference is because of the difference in multipliers, because hydrogen brings more GDP as per the input output table, more jobs and lower GHG emissions. Because of course, in this case of direct input output table, we can calculate both the direct and the indirect impacts. So when we talk about the GHG emissions impact, for example, while burning hydrogen, there are no emissions, so there are no direct impacts. However, in this case of diesel, there are direct impact. Of course, in hydrogen, there are indirect impacts because, for example, you are buying an electrolyzer. So you are burning somewhere. So scope 2 and scope 3 emissions, that also you calculate through input output table. So everything is a factor of multipliers. And yeah, we can discuss more in details. And because hydrogen industry has higher multipliers, it leads to more impacts, and it has lower GHG emissions impact multiplier compared to the diesel. And that's why you see that difference.
Thank you. Satisfied with the answer? Just one more question. We have been much more reasonable than the other sessions, I can tell you.
Good day. Thank you, Mr. BENOUNNA, for your rhetoric, which I liked very much, especially talking about. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you, Mr. BENOUNNA, for your briefing, and thank you, ladies. I think that the session is one of the best panels I have seen since today. It's social, economic. It should be also the ecological impact of the hydrogen on aspect. I have some question. How can you integrate in this industry small and medium Moroccan companies in this industry? How? What is your vision in integrating small and medium Moroccan companies in this industry? And also, as per my experience, is though I'm not an expert in hydrogen, I meet a lot of foreign investors or technology companies. They want to come to Morocco just to sell the solution and leave. What is the Moroccan perspective in terms of this vision that most of the biggest companies have? Thank you.
It's like the integration of small and medium enterprises and bringing about change, and of course, manufacturing and skill development.
I think that's the more difficult question. Nobody has the answer. It's clear that the investments here, we are speaking about scale. And as soon as we speak about scale, we speak about million of dollars. And this is not, I mean, in the possibilities of the Moroccan SMEs. I'm in this world of renewable energies in Morocco since 1987. And I see what happens in this market, that there are two markets. One market, let's say, in which there are worldwide players, and another market where there are local SMEs. These two worlds are different. The companies are different. The profile is different. And I'm afraid that in this case, it will be the same. This is a frank answer. Even you can see that, for instance, we have done already something in the car industry. Morocco now will be exporting very soon almost 1 million cars per year. Almost a bit less, but the next years it will happen. This is something we can do again with hydrogen in a way or another, to attract investments to manufacture here. But at the bottom lines, who will be the major players? It will not be Morocco. That's it. and the off-takers. Today, as we see the market, there is one off-taker in this country, OCP. And at the present prices, there is no more off-taker, or probably Sonasit for steel industry, but not much more. So there are two huge off-takers and no more. Why the hydrogen prices do not go below? Minister Ben Ali says $2. I would say $1, because once hydrogen is there in the stations, we will have you will have taxes to the hydrogen, and we must compete with the price of combustibles without taxes, and that's a challenge. Well, thank you. Too much to say, and have a nice. We'll close the session.
Yeah.